The language connection. How learning more helps your English. Introduction. Words are wonderful, aren't they? We use them all the time. We talk to friends, read fun stories, and learn new things. Language is like a string that connects us all. It lets us share our thoughts and feelings. Have you ever wondered how this works? How do we put words together so they make sense? Sometimes, learning English can feel like a puzzle. You might feel stuck, or some grammar rules might not make sense. This is normal. Many people learning English just focus on English. They learn English words, English rules, and practice speaking English. This is a good start. But it's like trying to understand a big machine by looking at only one small part. You might have trouble with verb tenses, or wonder why some English words go together, but others don't. It can feel like you're fighting the language. But what if there's another way to think about it? What if English is not separate, but part of a bigger world of languages? This book's main idea is that learning about languages in general can make your English much better. It helps you see the links between languages. We call this language interconnectedness. Think of it this way, languages are not alone. They share roots, like a big family tree, or language rules are like building blocks. Many languages use similar blocks, just put together in different ways. When you learn how one language builds something, it can help you understand how another language builds it, even if it looks different. This makes learning feel less like a fight and more like finding a secret code. Why is this important for you learning English? When you see these connections, you stop just memorizing rules. You start to truly understand why English works the way it does. This deeper understanding makes learning faster. Things that were hard in English become clearer when you see how other languages handle similar ideas. You will feel more sure of yourself, not just because you know more words, but because you understand the deeper patterns. For example, a confusing English verb tense might make sense when you see a similar way of talking about time in another language you know or one you are learning. Or understanding how sentences are built in a language like German can help you see why English puts words in a certain order. It's like opening a new window that makes everything else fit. In this book, we will go on a journey together. We will explore the amazing connections between languages. We will start with the basic parts of all languages. Then, we will see how languages share ways of building sentences and sharing ideas. We will look at examples of how learning other languages can make English clearer and easier to understand. We will also share tips on how to use this knowledge to improve your English. By the end of this book, you will not just see English as rules to follow. You will see it as a beautiful part of a large, connected language world. Are you ready to understand your English better? Are you excited to find the hidden bridges that connect languages? Let's start exploring the amazing connections that make language so strong and so interesting. 1. Why learn another language? Have you ever felt a little stuck with English? Maybe a grammar rule seems tricky, or a sentence just doesn't sound quite right, and you can't quite say why. It's like trying to fix a car engine when you only know how to drive. You know something's not working, but you don't know how it works inside. This is where learning another language helps, like a skilled mechanic who understands how engines work in general. It's not just about learning new words. It's about finding a whole new way to see how language works. Think about it. English is your home language. You use it every day without thinking about its rules. It's so familiar, it's almost invisible. But when you start learning a new language, like Spanish or Japanese or Swahili, you have to look at language from the outside. You have to think about things you've always done without thinking in English. This is where the idea of language interconnectedness truly shines. This idea says that languages are not like separate islands, they are more like parts of a big, connected family tree. They share common roots, similar ways of building sentences, and even patterns in how they express ideas. When you learn how one language works, especially its grammar, it's like finding a secret key that can unlock doors in another language, including your own English. Let's dive into why learning another language is so valuable, especially for improving your English. One of the biggest gifts that learning a new language gives you is the ability to unlock hidden English structures. We often take English grammar for granted. We know how to form a sentence, how to use verbs, and how to put adjectives before nouns. But when you learn a language that does things differently, it forces you to really see what's happening. Consider verb tenses. In English, we have simple past, present perfect, past perfect, and so on. We use helper words like have and had. Now imagine you start learning Spanish. Spanish verbs change their endings depending on who is doing the action and when. For example, the verb to speak hablar changes from hablo I speak to hablas you speak to habla he she it speaks. This is called conjugation. When you spend time learning and practicing these Spanish verb endings, you're not just learning Spanish. You're also becoming much more aware of how English verbs work, even though they don't change as much. You start to notice the small differences between I speak and I spoke, or I have spoken. The Spanish system makes you think, wow, verbs can change so much. This makes you pay more attention to the verb changes in English and understand why we use them. You might realize that the English present tense, like I speak, is quite simple compared to many other languages. This comparison helps you appreciate the structure of English verbs more deeply. It's like looking at a simple drawing and then seeing a very detailed painting. The simple drawing suddenly seems more deliberate and interesting when you understand the complexity that exists elsewhere. This leads to another powerful benefit: developing a grammar lens. Learning another language trains your brain to be more analytical about language. You can't just absorb it without thinking like you did with English as a child. You have to actively break sentences down, figure out the rules, and practice them. This process teaches you to look under the hood of sentences. You start to see the individual parts, the nouns, the verbs, the adjectives, the prepositions, and how they connect to create meaning. Let's say you're learning French. French has a lot of prepositions, words like in, on, at, to, and from. But French uses them in ways that are sometimes different from English. For instance, to say in the morning in French, you might use le matin. But to say at home, you might use chez moi. This difference can be confusing. However, the very act of struggling with these different prepositional phrases in French makes you much more careful and precise when you use prepositions in English. You start to question, should I say on the table or at the table? Or is it interested in or interested on? The struggle in French makes you more observant and deliberate in your English. You develop a sharper eye for detail, a grammar lens, that helps you spot when a preposition might be used incorrectly in English, or when a sentence could be clearer with a different word choice. This analytical skill is a direct result of the hard work of learning a new language's rules. Beyond specific grammar points, learning another language greatly improves what we call metalinguistic awareness. This sounds like a big, scary word, but it simply means becoming more aware of language itself. It's about thinking about language. When you learn a new language, you naturally start noticing patterns. You see how some words are similar across languages because they come from the same ancient roots. You might notice that English has borrowed many words from Latin and French. For example, the English word information sounds a lot like the French word information and the Spanish word información. This isn't a coincidence. It's a clear sign of language interconnectedness. When you learn about these connections, you start to understand why English is the way it is. You realize that English isn't a pure, isolated language. It's a rich tapestry woven with threads from many other languages. This understanding makes learning vocabulary in English much easier. If you learn the Latin root port, meaning to carry, you can instantly understand words like transport, to carry across, import, to carry in, and export, to carry out. This is a direct benefit of seeing how languages are linked. Your metalinguistic awareness grows, and you begin to see English not just as a set of rules, but as a living, breathing system with a fascinating history. Perhaps one of the most freeing aspects of learning another language is that it helps you overcome an English-centric bias. We grow up speaking English, so it often feels like the normal or right way for a language to function. We might unconsciously think that other languages are just strange versions of English. But when you learn a language that has a completely different sentence structure or uses sounds that are unfamiliar, you realize that English is just one way of organizing thoughts and expressing ideas. For example, in Japanese, the basic sentence order is often subject-object-verb-SOV. So, instead of I eat apples subject-verb-object, it would be something like I apples eat. This is very different from English SVO. Or consider languages that have noun cases like German. In German, the ending of a noun changes depending on whether it's the subject, the object, or something else. English doesn't really do this. We rely more on word order. When you encounter these different structures, it breaks the mold of your thinking. You start to understand that there isn't just one correct way for language to be. This can free you up when you're writing or speaking English. You might become less strict about certain grammar rules that you thought were absolute. You might feel more comfortable trying new sentence structures or finding new ways to express yourself, knowing that language is flexible and diverse. Let me share a little story. My friend, Anya, was always a bit hesitant about writing complex sentences in English. She felt like she was always making mistakes, and she worried a lot about getting the order of words just right. She decided to learn Italian. She loved the music of the language, but the verb conjugations were a challenge. Every verb changed its ending for I, you, he, she, we, you all, and they. It was like a puzzle, but a beautiful one. As she practiced Italian, she had to consciously think about who was doing the action. She had to remember the right ending for I eat, you eat, she eats. She spent hours practicing these patterns. Then, one day she was writing an email in English. She was describing a situation where she and her friend had gone to a cafe. She paused, thinking about how to phrase it. Before learning Italian, she might have just written something simple. But now, she found herself thinking more deliberately about the subject of the sentence. She realized that in English, we often use we or they as the subject, and the verb stays the same. She wrote, Anya and I went to the cafe. Then she thought about a time when just her friend went. She wrote, she went to the cafe. She told me later, it sounds so simple, Professor Lingua, but before Italian, I didn't really think about the subject and the verb connecting like that. I just knew it sounded right. But Italian made me understand the relationship between the person doing the action and the action itself. So, when I write in English, I'm not just copying a pattern, I understand the connection. It made me feel so much more confident about building sentences, even the longer, more complicated ones. Anya's experience is a perfect example of how struggling with grammatical concepts in another language, like verb conjugation in Italian, sharpens your awareness of how those same concepts work in English. It's like learning to ride a bicycle with training wheels first. Once you take them off, you understand balance and steering in a whole new way, and you can apply that to other wheeled vehicles too. So, why learn another language? Because it's not just about adding new words to your vocabulary. It's about gaining a deeper understanding of the very tools you use every day to communicate. It's about unlocking the hidden structures of English by seeing how other languages build their own. It's about developing a sharp, analytical grammar lens that makes you a more precise and confident English speaker and writer. It's about becoming more aware of language itself and its incredible diversity. And it's about breaking free from thinking English is the only way language can be. This newfound linguistic insight doesn't just stop at grammar, it opens doors to a richer appreciation of vocabulary and idiom, and that's exactly where we'll head next. 2. Boosting English with new languages. It's a funny thing, isn't it? We often think of learning a new language as adding a separate room to our house of knowledge. We learn Spanish, or French, or Japanese, and we tuck it away, a nice skill to have, but maybe not directly connected to the room where we keep our English. But what if I told you that learning any new language, and simply understanding how languages work in general, is like building a special bridge? This bridge doesn't just connect you to that new language, it shines a bright light back on your English, making it clearer, stronger, and easier to understand. Think about it. English has its own set of rules, its own way of putting words together. For many of us, these rules are just there. We learn them, we use them, but we might not always know why they are the way they are. It's like breathing. You do it without thinking. But when you start learning a language that does things differently, suddenly, you start noticing the way English breathes. Let's imagine a friend, let's call her Maya. Maya always felt a bit stuck with her English. She understood most things, but writing felt clunky and speaking sometimes tripped her up. She'd mix up small words that show where or when something happens, or her sentences would sound a little unnatural. Even if people understood her, she thought, maybe I'm just not good at English. Then Maya decided to learn German. Now, German might seem very different from English, and in many ways, it is. But as Maya wrestled with German grammar, something amazing happened. She started learning about something called cases. In German, the ending of a word can change depending on its job. In the sentence, is it the one doing the action? Is it the one the action is done to? Is it showing ownership? This is called a noun case. Maya found this incredibly confusing at first. She had to pay close attention to which word was doing what. As she got used to thinking about these different roles words could play, she started looking back at her English. She realized that while English doesn't have fancy endings for its words like German does, it has its own way of showing the same thing. English uses the order of words and small words like to, for, with, by. Suddenly, Mia understood why the order of words in an English sentence is so important. She saw that in English, the person or thing doing something usually comes first, then the action, then the person or thing the action is done to. This is how we know who is doing what. If Maya said, the dog chased the cat, we know the dog is the one doing the chasing. If she accidentally said, the cat chased the dog, the meaning changes completely. This was a revelation for her. Learning about German cases made her realize that English, too, has a very clear system for showing relationships between words. It just uses different tools. It wasn't that her English was bad. It was that she hadn't seen its basic structure so clearly before. This is a perfect example of language interconnectedness at work. The idea that different languages share common roots, structures, and patterns means that understanding how one language works can shed light on another. Maya's German study illuminated the mechanics of her English. This brings us to a really important idea, metalinguistic awareness. That's a fancy term for the ability to think about language itself. When you learn a new language, you are constantly taking it apart. You're looking at how sentences are built, how words are formed, and how meaning is made. You're asking questions like, why does this word change its ending here? Or what does this little word do? This process of taking apart and analyzing language is like building a muscle. The more you exercise that muscle by studying another language, the stronger it gets. And that stronger muscle can then be used to analyze your English. Think about asking a question in English. Often, we need to use the word do or does. For example, do you like pizza? Or does she live here? For people who grew up speaking English, this is automatic. But for learners, it can be tricky. When you learn a language like Spanish, you learn that to make a question, you often just change the order of the words or add a question mark at the end. For example, ¿Te gusta la pizza? You like pizza? There's no extra word like do. When you learn this about Spanish, you might pause and think, English always needs this do word for simple questions. Why? This thought process, this questioning of English's own rules, is metalinguistic awareness. It makes you more aware of the specific ways English forms questions. You start to understand that the do isn't just a random word. It's a special helper word that English uses to signal that a question is being asked. This deeper understanding makes it less likely you'll forget to use it or use it incorrectly. Your ability to think about language, sharpened by learning Spanish, now helps you refine your English. It's not just about grammar rules either. Every language has its own rhythm, its own common ways of expressing ideas. When you learn another language, you start to feel those patterns. You might notice that in some languages, it's very common to start a sentence with a description, while in others, it's more common to start with the action. English often likes to start with the person or thing doing something. This leads us to the idea of universal linguistic patterns. Languages, despite their differences, often share fundamental blueprints. Most languages have a way to talk about who is doing something a subject, what is being done a verb, and what is being acted upon an object. The most common order for these is subject-verb-object, or SVO. English uses this order. I eat apples. I equals subject, eat equals verb, apples equals object. When you learn a language that uses a different order, like Japanese, which is subject-object-verb SOV, watashi wa ringo. Otabe masu I apples eat. It doesn't mean English is wrong. It means you're seeing different ways the same basic building blocks can be arranged. This exposure to different arrangements helps you appreciate the logic behind English's SVO structure. It becomes less of an arbitrary rule and more of a familiar pattern within a larger system. You start to see that languages are like different architectural styles, all using similar materials, words, sounds, grammar, but building very different, yet equally functional, structures. Understanding these universal patterns makes learning and understanding English feel more natural, as it fits into a framework you've already begun to grasp. Moreover, the very act of learning a new language builds a kind of mental toolkit. The challenges you face, the strategies you develop, these are all transferable. If you've ever struggled to memorize a long list of French vocabulary, you've learned the power of repetition, of using flashcards, of connecting words with images. You've learned to be patient with yourself and to break down large tasks into smaller ones. These are the exact same skills that will help you expand your English vocabulary. The discipline you cultivated to learn verb changes in Italian can be applied to mastering tricky English phrases. The confidence you gain from finally being able to have a simple conversation in Portuguese can translate into the courage to speak more freely in English, even if you make mistakes. Learning a language isn't just about memorizing words, it's about developing a strong, analytical, and confident approach to communication. Let's go back to Maya. After her German experience, she started learning a bit of Mandarin Chinese. She knew it was very different, with no verb changes and a system of tones. But she found that even here the connections appeared. She learned about how Chinese uses special words to count things like a piece of or a cup of for nouns. This made her think again about English. English doesn't use these special counting words in the same way, but it does have ways of counting things. We say 2 apples, not just 2 apple. This made her more aware of how English handles quantity. The journey with languages is like exploring a vast, connected forest. Each new path you take, each new tree you examine, reveals something about the whole forest. Learning German showed Maya the importance of word roles, leading her to appreciate English word order. Learning Mandarin made her think about how languages count and categorize things. Each new language she explored didn't just add to her knowledge, it deepened her understanding of the very nature of language itself. This is the essence of language interconnectedness, the idea that different languages are not separate systems but share common roots, structures, and patterns. Understanding how one language works can shed light on the mechanics of another. So, when you're learning a new language, remember that you're not just learning a new set of words and rules. You are sharpening your mind, building your analytical skills, and gaining a deeper appreciation for the incredible, complex, and beautiful thing that language is. And in doing so, you are, perhaps in the most surprising way, becoming even better at English. You are not just learning a language. You are learning how to learn languages, and that is a superpower that benefits every word you speak and write in English. By actively engaging with the mechanics of other languages, we don't just add to our language skills, we forge a deeper, more natural connection with English itself. This new understanding of how languages are connected opens the door to exploring how specific language features, common across languages, can be used for even greater English mastery. 3. Understanding grammar better. Learning a new language can feel like opening a door to a whole new world. Sometimes, though, the grammar, the rules that hold sentences together, can seem like a tricky lock. You might look at English grammar rules and feel a bit lost, wondering why things are the way they are. But what if I told you that learning other languages could actually make English grammar much, much clearer? It's like finding a secret key that unlocks understanding. This is where the idea of language interconnectedness comes in. It's the simple, yet powerful, thought that languages are not separate islands. Instead, they are like branches on a big, old tree, all connected by common roots. They share similar structures, common ways of building sentences, and even similar ways of expressing ideas. When you learn how one language works, especially its grammar, you're not just learning about that one language. You're also learning something about language itself. This understanding can then shine a bright light on the grammar of a language you already know, like English. Think about it this way. If you've spent time learning how to build with Lego bricks, you've learned about connecting pieces, making structures, and following certain steps. If you then try to build something with a different kind of building toy, say K-Nex, you won't be starting from scratch. You already have an idea of how building works. You know about stability, about fitting parts together, and about creating shapes. Learning a new language is very much like that. Unveiling universal patterns. Many of the things we learn about English grammar are not special to English at all. They are fundamental ways that humans communicate. For example, most languages have a way to talk about things happening now, things that happened before, and things that will happen later. In English, we call these verb tenses: present, past, and future. It might seem like a simple idea, but it's the way we organize time in our sentences. Now, imagine you start learning a language like Spanish. You'll quickly discover that Spanish verbs also change their endings to show when an action happens. You'll learn about conjugations, where the verb changes depending on who is doing the action and when. For instance, the verb to eat in Spanish is comer. If you eat, it's como. If he or she eats, it's come. If you ate, it's comió. When you encounter this in Spanish, something wonderful happens. The idea of changing verbs to show time and person, which might have felt a bit abstract in English, suddenly becomes very real and concrete. You're not just memorizing that eat becomes ate for the past. You're actively practicing a system of changing verbs. This experience makes the concept of English verb tenses, past, present, future, and even more complex ones like the perfect tenses, feel much more familiar. It's like you've practiced the idea of a verb-changing game in one language, and now you can easily apply those skills to English. The underlying pattern of organizing time through verbs is the same. You've seen the blueprint in another language, and it helps you understand the English building. This is a core part of language interconnectedness. Recognizing that many grammatical concepts are like universal tools that languages use in different ways. By learning to use these tools in one language, you get better at recognizing and using them in others. Recognizing what's different by knowing what's similar. Sometimes, the best way to understand something is to see what it's not like. Learning another language helps you do this for English grammar. When you see how other languages express ideas, you start to notice the unique ways English does things. This contrast can make English grammar rules feel less like random rules and more like deliberate choices made by the language. Let's think about articles. Words like a and the. For many English speakers, these words are just part of the language, and sometimes using them correctly can be tricky. Why do we say a book but an apple? Why the sun but a star? Now, consider a language that doesn't use articles in the same way as English, or perhaps doesn't use them at all. Many Slavic languages, for example, don't have articles like a or the. When you learn English after speaking one of these languages, the articles become a whole new concept you have to master. You have to consciously learn when to use them and when not to. This conscious effort to understand English articles makes you more aware of their function. You start to ask yourself, why does English need these words? This awareness helps you understand that articles in English are a specific way to signal whether you're talking about something general or something specific. It's a tool English uses to add clarity. By comparing it to languages that don't use articles, you can better appreciate the role they play in English. You understand why English has them, not just that it has them. This is the power of contrast. When you learn a language where sentences are built in a very different order, say, with the verb at the very end, it makes you think more deeply about why English usually puts the verb in the middle. You start to see English sentence structure not as the only way, but as one way, and you can better appreciate its logic. You're not just learning English rules, you're learning about the different ways languages can be built, and that makes you a sharper observer of English. Demystifying complex English structures. There are some parts of English grammar that can feel like climbing a steep hill. Things like the passive voice, complex sentence structures, or even just understanding why certain phrases sound right while others sound wrong can be challenging. But here's where language interconnectedness truly shines. Seeing how other languages handle similar ideas can make these difficult English concepts much easier to grasp. Let's take the example of forming questions. In English, we often need to add an extra word like do or does and change the order of words. For example, you are happy becomes are you happy? And he likes pizza becomes does he like pizza? This can be confusing because it feels like we're adding extra steps. Now, imagine you are learning a language where questions are formed simply by changing the tone of your voice, or by adding a question word at the beginning or end of a sentence without changing the word order. For instance, in some languages, "you are happy" is just said with a rising voice. Or "he likes pizza" might be formed by adding a question particle at the end. When you experience these different ways of asking questions, you start to see the English way not as strange, but as a specific system. You understand that English uses auxiliary verbs and word order changes as its primary tools for forming questions. This knowledge doesn't just help you ask questions in that other language, it helps you understand the logic behind English. Question formation. You can see that English is using a particular mechanism, and once you understand that mechanism, it becomes much less intimidating. Another example is the passive voice. In English, we say the ball was hit by the boy. This is passive. The active version is the boy hit the ball. Sometimes, the passive voice can feel a bit indirect or even confusing. However, many languages have ways of forming passive sentences, and understanding how they do it can shed light on the English passive. You might learn that in another language, the passive is formed with a different verb ending or a different helper word. This exposure to various passive structures helps you see that the English passive is just one way to express that an action happened to something or someone, rather than that person or thing doing the action. It's another tool in the language building kit, and seeing it in different contexts makes its purpose clear. Building a grammar toolkit. Every time you learn a new language, or even just explore a new grammatical idea, you are adding to your personal grammar toolkit. This isn't a physical toolbox, but a collection of mental tools and understandings that help you analyze and understand language. The more languages you encounter, the richer and more versatile your toolkit becomes. Let's consider the concept of grammatical gender. In languages like German or French, nouns are assigned a gender, masculine, feminine, or neuter. This affects the articles and adjectives used with them. For example, in French, the table is la table feminine, but the book is le livre masculine. This can feel very strange to English speakers, as English nouns don't have grammatical gender. When you learn about grammatical gender in another language, you're not just memorizing which word is masculine or feminine. You're engaging with the fundamental way that languages organize their nouns. You're learning that languages can categorize things in ways that seem arbitrary to an outsider, but are logical within the system of that language. This experience can then help you appreciate why English nouns don't have grammatical gender. You realize that English has chosen a different path. Instead of using gender to change articles and adjectives, English relies more on word order and context. You also understand how English uses pronouns like he, she, and it to refer back to nouns, and how the choice of pronoun is often based on the actual sex of a person or thing, not a grammatical category. By understanding grammatical gender in French or German, you gain a deeper appreciation for the absence of it in English. It helps you understand how English handles noun classification differently. Your grammar toolkit now includes the understanding of what is grammatical gender and how languages deal with noun categories, which allows you to analyze English grammar with more insight. You're not just learning a rule, you're understanding a concept and how different languages implement or omit it. This process of building a grammar toolkit is continuous. Each new language, each new grammatical structure you encounter adds another tool. You become a more skilled grammar detective, able to look at English sentences and understand the underlying logic, the choices the language has made, and how it all fits together. You start to see the connections, the shared roots, and the elegant patterns that make up the vast and beautiful world of language. So, when you find yourself struggling with an English grammar point, remember the connections. Think about the other languages you might be learning, or even just the general ways languages work. That seemingly difficult English rule might just be a variation of a pattern you've already seen, or a unique choice. That becomes clearer when you compare it to the vast tapestry of language interconnectedness. Once we see how learning other languages sharpens our grammatical intuition, we can begin to appreciate how this deeper understanding extends beyond just the rules, influencing our ability to communicate more effectively and express ourselves with greater nuance. This leads us to explore 4. Connecting language structures. Learning a new language is like opening a door to a new place. But this door also shows you more about the room you are already in, your English. This is true. How languages are connected is a very interesting thing to learn. Think of all languages as part of one big family. They may look different, but they have the same basic parts inside. This is called language connection. It means languages are not separate. They are linked by old roots, same parts, and similar ways of working. When you learn how one language works, especially its rules, it's like getting a secret map to help you understand another language, even English. Sometimes, the best way to understand something is to look at it from a new side. Learning a third language can give you a special view. It can make the rules of a language you already know, like English, suddenly easier to see and understand. It's like looking at something you know well through a special glass. You suddenly see things you never noticed before. Studying the rules of one language can give you ideas you can use in another. It makes you think more about language in general, and this thinking is a great help for learning how language parts work together. One of the best things about learning new languages is how they show you more clearly the language you already know. Your first language has already taught you a lot about how language works. You know what a naming word is, what an action word does, and how words fit together to make sense. When you start learning English, you are not starting from nothing. You are often finding things you know in new words and new ways of putting words together. Imagine your first language puts words in a clear order in a sentence, like I eat apples. This is subject, verb, object. English also uses this order. I eat apples. So, when you learn English, this basic sentence order feels normal. You already know how to put words together to say a simple action. If your first language puts words in a different order, like I apples, eat, learning English's I eat apples might seem a bit strange at first. But here is the important part. You already understand the idea of sentence order. You know that putting words in different places changes what they mean. So, learning English's order is not about learning the idea of order itself, but about learning which order English likes and why. This makes learning less about making up new rules and more about using what you already know. You are not learning to walk, you are learning a new way to dance. This mirror effect is very strong. It means that the basic language parts you have used your whole life are still there, ready to help you. You already know how subjects do actions, how descriptions work, and how we ask questions. English uses these same basic parts. When you see an English grammar rule, you can often connect it to a similar rule or idea in your first language. This connection makes the English rule feel less like a strange new rule and more like a change to something you already know. It's like seeing a cousin in a new town. They might dress differently and talk differently, but you can still see they are from your family. Let's think about verb times. English has many verb times, and they can sometimes be hard. We have the simple past, I walked, the past that was happening, I was walking, and the past that is still important, now I have walked. These can be confusing because they all talk about the past, but in slightly different ways. How can learning another language help here? Many languages have ways of talking about the past, and some do it in ways that can make English verb times much clearer. Think of a language that clearly shows the difference between an action that happened very recently and one that happened a long time ago. For example, some languages have a special ending for verbs for I ate just now that is different from I ate yesterday. When you learn this, you start to see the small differences that English shows with its verb times. The English present perfect, I have eaten, often talks about an action that happened in the past but is still important now, or an action that happened at some time in the past. If your first language has a way of showing this past but still connected to now idea, you will find the English present perfect much easier to understand. You might think, this is like how we say it in my language when something happened and it still matters today. Or think about the difference between I ate simple past and I have eaten present perfect. For people learning, the question is often, when do I use which one? If you have learned a language where the past tense is used for actions finished at a specific time and another verb form is used for actions that started in the past and continue to now, or have a result now, you can start to see the sense in English. The I ate is like the simple past in your other language, an action that is finished. The I have eaten might feel like the form in your other language that talks about a past action with a connection to now. By comparing these, the English verb times become less like random choices and more like tools for showing exact meanings. You start to see that English verb times are not just random rules, but a system for showing when and how an action is related to the present moment. Now, let's talk about articles. A, N, and the. These small words are a big problem for many English learners. When do you use a book and when do you use the book? What about an apple versus the apple? It can feel like guessing. But here is an interesting connection. Languages that do not have articles at all can actually help you understand why English uses them and how they work. Think about languages like Russian, Japanese, or many languages from the Slavic group. They do not have words like a or the. Yet, they communicate perfectly well. How do they do it? They might use word order, or different endings on words, or the situation to show if they are talking about a general thing or a specific thing. When you learn one of these languages, you start to realize that articles are not needed in every language. This makes you stop and think, why does English need these words? Once you start asking that question, the reason for English articles becomes much clearer. You learn that a book means any book, one book out of many. It is not specific. The book means a special book that both you and the speaker know about. It is specific. Seeing how other languages manage without them shows the special job these small English words do. It is not just about adding extra words. It is about giving important information about whether you are talking about something general or something specific. Learning a language without articles can make you see the exactness that English articles add. It's like finding out that a tool you never used before actually has a very important job in making your work easier and more correct. Sentence order and word order are another area where languages connect well. Every language has a way of putting words together to make sentences. English tends to be very strict about its word order. We usually put the subject first, then the action word, then the object. For example, the cat chased the mouse. If we change the order, like the mouse chased the cat, the meaning changes completely. In English, word order is very important for meaning. However, some languages are much more free. Latin, for example, can put words in many different orders and the meaning is still clear because the endings of the words tell you which word is the subject and which is the object. Russian is another example of a language with more free word order. When you learn about these languages, you start to understand why English is so particular about its word order. You realize that English depends a lot on where words are placed to give meaning, while other languages might use different tools. This comparison helps you see how important it is to put words in the right place in English. It is not just a rule to remember, it is a basic part of how English communicates clearly. You learn that in English, changing the order is not just a choice of style, it can change the whole message. This understanding makes you more careful and more aware of how you build your sentences in English, leading to clearer and more effective talking. Let's look more closely at how grammar ideas in one language can make English clearer. A common problem for English learners is understanding prepositions. Words like in, on, at, to, from, with, they seem simple, but using them correctly can be very hard. Why do we say on the table but in the box? Why at home but to the store? Many languages do not use prepositions in the same way. Some languages, like Latin or Russian, use a case system. This means that the ending of a naming word changes depending on its job in the sentence, whether it is the subject, the object, or if it is related to a place or direction. For example, in a language with a case system, you might not need a preposition like to because the naming word for the store would have a special ending that means to the store. When you learn about these case systems, you begin to see the job that prepositions do in English. They are the words that English uses to show connections between naming words and other parts of the sentence, especially connections of place, direction, and time. The case system in another language does a similar job, but with word endings instead of separate words. Understanding this can help you grasp why English needs these prepositions and how they work together. You start to see that on the table is English's way of showing the connection between the naming word table and whatever is on it. To the store shows the direction of movement. Even though the way it works is different from a case system, the main purpose, showing connections, is the same. This way of looking at it makes the rules of English prepositions, which can seem random, feel more logical. You are not just remembering on for flat surfaces and in for closed spaces. You are understanding that these words are English's way of marking connections in space and direction. So, what is a clear grammar idea in English that is often hard for learners, and how can comparing it to a similar or different way of doing things in another language make it easier to understand? Let's take the English passive voice. We use it when the subject of the sentence is acted upon rather than doing the action. For example, the cake was eaten by John passive versus John ate the cake active. The passive voice can be tricky because it often sounds less direct, and learners might not know when to use it. Now, imagine you are learning a language that uses the passive voice very differently, or perhaps uses a different way to say something similar. Some languages might use reflexive verbs, where the verb itself suggests the action is done to itself or without a clear person doing it. For instance, instead of the cake was eaten, a language might have a structure that means the cake ate itself, or eating happened to the cake. Or, some languages might simply prefer not to use the passive voice at all, relying more on the situation or saying it in a different way. When you see these different ways of saying that something is acted upon, you can start to see the purpose of the English passive voice more clearly. You realize that English uses it when the person doing the action is not known, is not important, or when you want to focus on the thing being acted upon. For example, in the window was broken, we do not know or care who broke it. We care about the broken window. Learning how other languages handled this situation, perhaps by using general verbs or simply stating the result, can help you understand that the English passive voice is just one of many ways to say this idea. It is a tool that English offers, and by seeing how other languages achieve similar communication goals. Conclusion: you have come to the end of our shared time. I hope you found something wonderful during our exploration. We started this journey to see how learning about other languages could make your English better. I am sure you now see that this is not just a nice thought, but a strong truth. Learning a new language, or even just learning how languages work, opens up a new way to understand things. It is like finding a secret key. This key helps you understand grammar and meaning more deeply, not just in the new language, but also in the English you use each day. Think about all the links we found. Languages are not like separate boxes that are locked. Instead, they are like a big family that is all connected. They share roots, patterns, and ways of thinking. This idea, which we called language connectedness, is the most important part of why learning languages is so good. It means that when you learn grammar in one language, you are often learning something basic about how all languages, including English, are built. Do you remember how looking at how French uses small words like a and differently from English made that English rules for a and very clear? Or how understanding the idea of words having a gender in Italian, even though English does not have this, helped? You see how flexible English word order can be. These are not just random facts. They show us the common plan that all human languages share. We also saw how words like telephone or biology have beginnings that are found in many languages. This makes them feel less strange and more familiar in English. By seeing how other languages show emphasis or small differences in meaning with sentence structure, you have learned to notice the small ways English can express meaning. What you have really gained is a super skill. This is the power to understand how language works in general. This skill works for any language. Think of languages like a big, beautiful rug. Each language is a different thread, but they are all woven together by common patterns and rules. Learning one thread helps you see how the whole rug is made. By doing this, you can see the beauty and strength of your own English thread even more. This deeper understanding changes your English in a big way. You are not just following rules anymore. You are understanding why the rules exist. This makes it much easier to fix your own mistakes and to know why some sentences sound right and others sound wrong. Your collection of words becomes bigger, not just with new words, but with a better understanding of where words come from and the small differences in their meanings. Words now have more history and connection. You can guess the meaning of words, understand small differences between words that mean almost the same thing, and use words more precisely. Your writing can become more beautiful, and your speaking can become more sure, as you use this wider understanding of language possibilities, whether you think about it or not. This journey has given you a powerful new way to look at English. It has changed any worry you had into a quiet confidence. So, as you continue, I want you to welcome this connectedness. See every language you meet, whether you are learning it or just hearing it, as a chance to learn more about the amazing system of language itself. Keep exploring, keep listening, and keep connecting. The beauty of language connectedness is that it keeps giving. Every new word you learn, every grammar rule you see in any language, will likely show you another part of this amazing connection. This will make your English even better. Go out and explore the connected world of language. Your English and your understanding of how people think will be much richer because of it.